अगर तलवार की नोक पर या एटम बम के डर से कोई हमारे देश को झुकाना चाहे, दबाना चाहे, ये देश हमारा दबने वाला नहीं। तो एक सरकार के नाते हमारा क्या जवाब हो सकता है सिवाय इसके कि हम हथियारों का जवाब हथियारों से दें।
Alright, so हम हथियारों का जवाब हथियारों से दें. What made Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, the second Prime Minister of independent India, gave such strong statements? Who was he talking about? So, well, a very good evening, everyone, and welcome to a third session of India Military Events Battle Post Independence. And today we'll be talking about the events that transpired 1965 Indo-Pak War. And what happened during and after 1965 war. So incidentally, just 2 days before from today, 55 years ago, on September 23rd, ceasefire happened between India and Pakistan. And next week is Lal Bahadur Shastri ji's birthday. So timing wise, we are very well placed to discuss this topic. Before I begin talking, I would like to mention that I have sourced this information from internet, books and other references. So just the slide arrangement, presentation and flow is all mine. Please pardon me if I have forgotten to quote any reference. It is completely unintentional. Well, this session is not about blaming or maligning any name, place, person or religion. This is again not about raising questions on what has been done and how it has been done. Rather, this is there to learn from our past, to respect our leaders, and to respect our nation and our armed forces. So, okay, so let's start discussing the events that transpired the war of 1965 between India and Pakistan. But since we are moving in a chronological order, there is an important event that we all must know before we even start discussing about 1965 war. So if you remember from my first session where I explained the region of northern India, here you go. So this is the region of northern India, and this all is POK, right? So starting from here, this all is Pakistan occupied Kashmir. But after 1962 war with India and China that we discussed last time, Pakistan started to build its own its relationship with China, and as a part of that strategy, Pakistan gifted this particular region that we call Shaksgam Valley to China. So imagine they gifted this whole region to China in 1963. It borders with China's Xinjiang province in the north, POK in the south and west, and the Siachen Glacier in the east. So India obviously reject this whole agreement of gifting this entire territory, which is rightfully ours, and but controlled by Pakistan. So yeah, so moving on. So these are the key actors. So on the left-hand side, you can see Ayub Khan, the then president of Pakistan. He was the first military general who became the president of Pakistan after the first successful coup in Pakistan. And then foreign minister, you can see Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who later became prime minister of Pakistan. Then on the right-hand side, Pandit Lal Bahadur Shastri, the second prime minister of India, defense minister Y.B. Chavan, Indian Army Chief General Jain Chaudhary, and Chief of Air Staff Air Marshal Arjun Singh, who later became first Marshal of Indian Air Force. These names will keep on coming during the course of our presentation. Well, India just emerged out of 1962 war and was trying to rebuild itself as a nation. And next few years were very difficult for India, where it has to beef up on its military strength on one side, and on the other side, it has to stabilize the economy. Now, while things were not going well for India, both on a political and economical side, our neighbor Pakistan saw it as an opportune moment and kept on launching various operations anticipating to break India's spirit and capture Kashmir. So we'll explore some key events that occurred before the actual war in September month of 1965. Again, as I said, post Indo-China War, India was going through a very difficult phase in 1964-65. Pandit Nehru also died on May 27, 1964. And this created a huge vacuum in India's politics, as there was no one to fill the stature of such huge statement. So at that time, Bharat Ratna K. Kamaraj, who was the most influential person in the Congress party and a towering statesman, made Lal Bahadur Shastri the next Prime Minister of India. Now, Shastri ji, you all know, he came from a very humble background and was considered to be a weak and indecisive person. And because of this very image, he was made Prime Minister, as Congress was thinking at that time that government eventually will be run by the Congress Working Committee and a handful of influential congressmen. So right from day one of his becoming the PM of India, Lal Bahadur Shastri ji had a humongous task to cater to the economic crisis and most importantly the food crisis that India was facing at that time, because there was no food actually to feed the country and food inflation was on record high. He was constantly being criticized by his own partymen and obviously his opposition about the current situation, his indecisiveness, every now and then, because he succeeded Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. So he was being compared with Pandit Nehru. Pandit Nehru was a charismatic leader, right? So he was compared with Pandit Nehru both by public and media. Now at this vulnerable time, he also faced intrusions on India's sovereignty by his naughty neighbor on various fronts. But we'll see as we come along this whole session, contrary to all these perceptions, Lal Bahadur Shastri ji turned out to be a tenacious leader, brought the country together by his slogans like skip a meal a week, grow your kitchen gardens, and the very famous one, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. Now, while India was battling with all these crises, Pakistan, on the other hand, was growing on its military strength, right? So, and its relationship with USA at that time was getting stronger and stronger. And Pakistan Army had much sophisticated ammunition than Indian Army. They received sophisticated state-of-the-art armory and artillery from United States as a part of its MAP MAP program. MAP stands for Military Assistance Program. They say a picture says 1,000 words, and I couldn't find a better picture than this to depict the congeniality of Pakistan and USA, where President of Pakistan, General Ayub Khan, is seen gifting a seal-drawn horse to Jacqueline Kennedy, the wife of US President John F. Kennedy at that time. So you can imagine the relationship that Pakistan had with US. So before I start discussing with key military operations, let's have a quick view of military strength of both the nations. Now, from 1954 to 1963, Pakistan received variety of arms, as I already told you in my earlier slide, for all its Navy, Army, and Air Force. So comparing few aspects from both sides, at that time, India had 9 infantry divisions. And out of these, 4 were on a reduced establishment. So 9, although we had 9 infantry divisions, but they were not fully operative. We also had 11 mountain divisions, and these were newly formed after the 1962 Indo-China War. They were also running short of equipments, and not these mountain division troops were not even trained for the plain warfare that we were about to face in coming months. To give you an idea, typically a division consists of around 15,000 combat troops and 8,000 support elements. Now, on the contrary, Pakistan had 7 divisions, and mind you, that does not include 250,000 odd armed militia, the irregular army that they had at that time. So this is just the army numbers. On the artillery and armor segment, which were the main machines for this kind of war, we were severely lagging. So they had 9 regiments of the state-of-the-art Patton tanks acquired by US, which amounts to around 350 Patton tanks. Patton tanks at that time were the state-of-the-art tanks. There were no tanks better than that, and they were perceived to be invincible, indestructible. And while we had we had 4 regiments around, that means around 180 Centurion tanks, which were barely matching to pattern tanks. Other than Centurion tanks, we had ancient World War II famed Sherman tanks and AMX-13 light, very light tanks from France, which were of no match to their armory. And they also were better than us on the armored division side. So they had 2 armored division while we had only 1 armored division. So they were just double. On the artillery gun side also, they have all the latest and heavy guns, like and super latest and heavy guns like heavy howitzer, which can destroy the tank, while we had very light infantry artillery guns at that time. And similar, and one important thing to note is that even though you must be seeing we are higher on the number side, an important aspect is that half of our artillery was deployed on the China's border. So we were just keeping up with the half of the artillery on the western side of the border. And same was the case with combat aircraft. Half of our air force was deployed against the China. Pakistan had 1 squadron of F-104 supersonic starfighter jets and 8 squadrons of 86 Sabre jets, right? We had a squadron amounts to around 45 planes, right? And India had only matching to that 6 Hunter squadrons, out of which 2 again were deployed against China, and 5 NAT squadrons. It was meant only for air defense, and rest all of our planes were subsonic planes, while Pakistan had a good amount of supersonic planes. So subsonic planes means these are good enough to support the ground troops, like support the army or infantry movement, but they were not suitable enough for air-to-air combat. So Pakistan, all in all, had a definite edge over India in terms of machinery. But as they say, war is not fought by machines, but the person sitting behind the machine. We'll see how, despite all odds and heavy losses, we kept our spirits high and gave a tough fight in the Battle of 1965. Looking at all these conditions, India's vulnerable state and Pakistani's superior military position. Also, there were assurances to Pakistan from China to keep engaging India on the Eastern Front if need arises. Pakistan's foreign minister, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, convinced Ayub Khan that this is the opportune time to attack India, and he launched his first offensive on India to take on Kashmir. Right. So Ayub Khan sent Pakistan's army in India's run of Kutch as a test of India's might in the name of Operation Desert Hawk. Now, first, let me give you a brief background onto what run of Kutch really is. Like, run of Kutch is a salty marshland, as you can see on the map, which remains waterlogged for most of the year. As the name suggests, run means marsh, which means that run of Kutch remains flooded most of the year. The annual rainfall is about 20 to 38 centimeters per year, you can imagine, and most of them which falls during southwest monsoon months. So India claims Kutch traditional boundary. So this is the Kutch traditional boundary, the whole of the Kutch. India claims its traditional boundary as the international border, whereas Pakistan claimed that the border should go through the middle of the marshlands. Now, despite inhospitable conditions, it has a strategic importance to India because of its nearby air base, naval base, and the region is also rich in mineral fishery and also had a potential for oil and gases, right? So we, both India and Pakistan had a border negotiation in 1960, and we both agreed that around 3,500 square miles of this area is disputed. And we agreed that, okay, that it is disputed, but we'll resolve it through further discussions, and both governments will get involved. However, it was agreed that neither side will disturb the status quo. What that means is that we will not encroach these areas, and there will be no military supervision in this area, right? But again, as the nature of Pakistan is, contrary to the agreement of 1960, since January 1965, Pakistani troop movement started intruding Indian territory. So this they started including this territory from this side, right? And they occupied and they started moving their tank armory into this area, right? And they occupied an area, Indian village Kanjar Court, on the northern border of Rann of Kutch, and attacked posts like BR Bait, Vigo Court, Sada Post, Point 84, all in the northern area of Rann of Kutch. So obviously, Indian Army had to retaliate. We retaliated, and fierce fighting continued till April 30th. And though we suffered heavy losses, heavy damage, but we also were able to destroy a good amount of Pakistani ammunition dumps, and they also suffered major losses. We definitely were caught off guard, and the terrain was also not favorable to us because of the marshy land. There was a lot of quagmires, in Hindi you call it daldal and all. So we were not able to move very frequently on that side, on our side of the land. So it was a certain kind of a setback to us. But on April 30th, right? So on April 30th, September 1965, the advancement of Pakistani troops suddenly stopped, and UK, United Kingdom, had brokered a ceasefire between India and Pakistan, and the agreement got effective from July 1965, but it finally got settled in 1968 only, and a tribunal was required, an international tribunal was required to settle this whole issue. And on the settlement, Pakistan got only 10% of the claimed territory of 3,500 square miles, while we got the remaining 90% of the territory. Now it is said that this was just a test advancement of Ayub Khan, and he also did not wanted to escalate the tension at that time. And there were three main reasons for such heavy armory deployment in the area of Rann of Kutch. So first one was to entice Indian armor away from the northern India. So because our heavy army deployment was in the northern region in Jammu and Kashmir, so they wanted to India to relocate their army from the northern region. The second was to test the capability of Indian army to fight a war, and the third one was they wanted to see how US will react on their usage of their US acquired equipments, mainly pattern tanks, in the clear violation of Pakistan's commitment. So so they kind of from this stand of Ayub Khan and Pakistan army drew a self-comforting conclusion that India is a weak force and India is struggling on its own and is isolated internationally because no one came to the support. So they went ahead with their another planned misadventure. It is called Operation Gibraltar in the month of August 1965. Now, with the military successes at Kutch, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto created a plan to sever Jammu and Kashmir, to chop off Jammu and Kashmir from India by creating tension and unrest in the entire Jammu and Kashmir region, and instigate lawless activities with the view to paralyze the administration and project a picture of internal revolt. It was codenamed as Operation Gibraltar, and they infiltrated around 30,000 armed men known as Gibraltar Force. All were trained in guerrilla warfare. Their main aim was to instigate an uprising, capture key places, disrupt day-to-day activities, disrupt communications, and project this as a internal civil unrest, and then capture or free, in their terms, Jammu and Kashmir region on humanitarian grounds. So that was the plan of Operation Gibraltar, to create an unrest and then instill Pakistan army and take away the Jammu and Kashmir region. The whole operation under overall command of Major General Akhtar Hussain Malik. He was the general officer commanding of 12 Infantry Division of Pakistani Army. The 4 sector commanders in the POK under 12 Infantry Division were made responsible. So imagine this was entire 30,000 force was trained and organized by Pakistani Army and launched. So they created various infiltration forces, and they were supposed to launch their respective was meticulously planned, and they made various individual forces which were still location. For example, in the Valley, Saladin was responsible for the Sonmarg, Dras, and Kargil. It was the Tariq's force responsibility to cause chaos and havoc. So on and so forth. So they have around 9 to 10 different forces responsible for different areas of operations. So this is a map just showing how each of the forces infiltrated Jammu and Kashmir region from their designated points. So see, as you can see, this is the Salahuddin force entering from here, Ghaznavi force entering from here, similarly Babar force entering from here. So imagine you can see all the forces from different territory, region of territory, different area entering, and just to cause instability, havoc, chaos in the Jammu and Kashmir region, and ultimate aim is to capture the entire territory. Now, soon Indian authorities realized that these guerrilla troops were a serious threat to the Jammu and Kashmir region, and the only effective way is to eliminate them. And to eliminate them, we have to go on an offensive. Now, what that means is we have to cross the ceasefire line to plug their entry routes, because they were coming from enemy region. So we have to destroy their sanctuaries in Pakistan. Now, we are a democracy, right? We just cannot just wake up tomorrow morning and enter into another country's territory. So we have a parliamentary system. We met on an emergency basis, unanimously decided to retaliate against Pakistan. And once the decision was taken, Indian Army was swift to do a surgical strike on these three major positions that were soon captured, starting with Kargil Heights. Now, Kargil, you must have known, right? Kargil is a very common name, but it was not with us at that time. It was with Pakistan. We recently returned Kargil in June 1965 due to United Nations appeal. And Indian pickets observed occasional enemy movement on point 13620. Again, this is a very famous point. You will hear this point again and again in 1971 war, 1999 war. So we saw enemy movement on this point, and it appeared that Pakistanis were only patrolling there by the day. Now, since this was a strategic position, it was causing much trouble to Indian troops movement and was dangerous to Srinagar Leh highway as well. On 14th August, 17 Punjab was ordered to capture point 13620 at the earliest. Now, Major Balwant Singh, who was the commander of 3 platoons, assaulted from 3 different objectives, 3 different directions. The troops climbed the slopes through the minefield gaps that were cleared by engineers throughout the night, and the operation commenced on 1 a.m. in the morning and was captured. This whole operation was completed by the morning of 15th August. So imagine, without any casualty. This was a radio silence operation. The enemy was completely taken aback. With the capture of these peaks in Srinagar, the Srinagar being at the high peak, and it helped them keep vigil on the enemy movement. The next one was a limited offensive. It's in the Thitwal sector, as you can see I've highlighted here in the map. It happened over a period of time. It happened over days. So, like, for example, on 23rd August they capture a area called Ring Contour. On 24th August they capture Richmond Ridge. On 25th, 26th August they capture Peer Sahiba, and by 3rd and 4th they capture Joy. This is an area which enabled army to reach out to Mirpur, and Mirpur was just few kilometers from Zafrabad. So all these points were of very strategic importance to India, as it gave army leverage to watch on enemy movement and infiltrators. And with each victory, our army also seized a lot of arms and ammunitions and rations from Pakistani forces, which were later used to our benefit. Right. The second, then came the capture of Haji Pir Pass. Now, this was the most significant victory. The capture of Haji Pir Pass took life out of Operation Gibraltar altogether. Now, why it was significant? Because Haji Pir was a bulge situated, you can see here, this is the bulge. Haji Pir was a bulge situated in POK between Indian town of Uri and Poonch. So Uri and Poonch were here, and it was strategically very important, as this was the main breeding ground for infiltrators. Now, Pakistani kept huge stocks of supplies and ammunition for the Gibraltar force here only. we launched Operation Bakshi on 25th of August to capture Hajipir Pass. You can see here, this is the bulge that I was talking about, and this is Uri, the Uri and Poonch. These are our towns, Indian towns, right? So 68 it was assigned to 68 infantry under the legendary Brigadier Zorawar Chand Bakshi. One para, it was a paratrooper unit. It was a part of assault team, and as per plan of Operation Bakshi, one para was supposed to capture Sangh. Now this is another point which is near to Hajipir. They were just supposed to capture Sangh and make a passage, and then four Rajput. It's another battalion. Uh, four Rajputs were supposed to march ahead and then take over Hajipir Pass. So one para was supposed to clear the passage, and four Rajputs were supposed to attack and clear Hajipir Pass. Now, initial offensive was to commence on 25th August, but it was delayed by 24 hours because the weather was not conducive. It was raining very heavily. However, next day, the soldiers of one para, which was led by Major Ranjit Singh Dayal, braved the extreme weather and marched ahead. Now, Major R.S. Dayal, Ranjit Singh Dayal, was not supposed to be in the assault team because he was senior enough, but he insisted to be a part of the team. They physically climbed the slippery slopes of those treacherous mountains in zero visibility. The enemy was not expecting an attack at that time because the weather was not conducive enough. They were not imagining or anticipating any enemy movement at that time. After a very minor resistance, they fled. The enemy completely fled in the sheer panic, and Major Dayal and company captured the formidable Sangh picket that I was telling you. They captured Sangh without any much ado, right? So as I told you earlier, the original plan was four Rajput now to come and pass through and attack Hajipir Pass. However, Major Dayal insisted to continue marching on to Hajipir Pass, and he also got confirmation to march ahead. The men were tired by this operation, by the Sangh operation, but were also inspired by their tough commander for the last push. Now, to capture Hajipir Pass itself, Major Dayal decided to take an alternative route to avoid climbing into the line of fire, because that would mean, but that alternative route would mean to capture a vertical, do a vertical treacherous climb of 4,000 feet without any climbing gears. Well, as they say, Major Dayal and his men had to climb before the dawn in the cover of darkness, and by 10:30 a.m. on August 28, Indian flag was flying high on the Hajipir Pass. So this is the entire troop that captured Hajipir Pass. Now, with the capture of Hajipir Pass, which is the main launch pad of these infiltrators, it just knocked the wind out of Operation Gibraltar altogether. Pakistani were completely frustrated by now, and there was a sheer panic in the general headquarters in the Muzaffarabad itself, and Muzaffarabad itself was now under the threat. Major Dayal was awarded Mahavir Chakra, India's second highest gallantry medal, for his inspiring and decisive leadership against heavy odds. Right. So by mid-August, the majority of the infiltrators ran away back to the POK, and towards the end of the August, it was evident that Operation Gibraltar has fallen apart completely. The infiltrators failed to create a general uprising amongst the local people. So kudos goes to the local people as well, which didn't go by the infiltrators. And there was heavy retaliation by the Indian Army, which thwarted their plans of creating unrest. So this whole thing, the failure of Operation Gibraltar, made General Ayub go berserk, right? And then he launched an all-out attack on India on 1st of September as Operation Grand Slam. Okay, so let me cover Grand Slam, then maybe I'll take a break. So this Operation Grand Slam was their plan was to destroy Akhnur Bridge and to cut off the road link between Jammu and Poonch. So now this is Akhnur, right? It had a bridge. In fact, it has a bridge, and their plan was to take off this bridge, because what that means is that this then will cut off this region of India, northern and part of Kashmir from the southern part of Kashmir. Jammu will be stranded, and Naushera, Rajouri and Pooch will be stranded altogether. And by doing this, they could have easily taken over Jammu and then taken over the entire J&K region. So that was the Operation Grand Slam basic strategy. So on 1st of September 1965, Pakistani launched an all-out attack. Now, this was a major heavy attack with medium artillery guns in Cham and Jorian sector. Just to revisit the Aknur. So this is Aknur that you saw in earlier map. This is Cham, and this is Jorian. So Pakistani army attacked from this area, and their plan was to capture Aknur quickly and take off Jammu and Kashmir. So the attack was led by 2 regiments of Patton tanks, which were, you can imagine, confronted by only few anti-tank gun attachments. We had gun attachments, and then only 1 squadron of AMX-13 light tank, which was no match to the Patton tanks. Now a squadron have around 14 tanks, and a regiment have around 45 tanks to compare with, if you want to take a comparison. So Pakistani army, obviously, they were fully planned, fully geared up, made a good progress initially, but Indian troops put up a stiff fight against the enemy. They were able to slow down their movement against all outs, definitely, and delayed the enemy. They managed to delay the enemy movement by 1 whole day. Indian Air Force also got plugged in and got involved in the operation, as heavy artillery movement was not possible because that bridge was not strong enough to take heavy armored vehicles onto that. Right, so Indian Air Force has to be called on. So Pakistani attack and plan was based on basically surprise and speed element, and they thought that India being a democracy, the government will be slow to react. They will take time to do some decision making, and by that time they will capture Aknur and Jammu. So Grand Slam did achieve initial success, as the Cham fell on the first day, so we lost Cham, right, on the first day. But thereafter Pakistani lost their momentum, and instead of pushing on to Joria, right, which was their initial plan, immediately they were ineffective till 3rd September. Now this was due to there were multiple factors. Major was we gave them a tough resistance to the enemy movement. Our Air Force got involved, and also one of the factor was there was a change of Pakistani command, as Major General Hussain was sacked and replaced by Major General Yahya Khan. Now Yahya Khan is the same Yahya Khan who would later become military dictator of Pakistan. Some say that Major General Hussain removal was due to the failure of Operation Gibraltar and this unparalleled Indian resistance, which he never thought of, and he always thought of it to be a cakewalk. But anyways, all said and done, Pakistani army still had the edge, and they kept on moving. And by 5th September 1965, Pakistani tank reached just 4 miles away from the Aknur bridge that they wanted to destroy, and it was a matter of days before the capture of Kashmir by Pakistani army. But I mean, the story goes on. The PM Lal Bahadur Shastri played a master stroke at that time, and he asked Indian army to go and capture Lahore instead. And at that juncture, we were about to lose J&K to Pakistani forces. Our Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri ji made a grand strategic decision, which must surely rank amongst the greatest and most decisive by any Indian Prime Minister before or after. He ordered Indian army to cross international border and take the war inside Pakistani territory. He asked them to capture Lahore, which was a more favorable terrain for us. He assured Indian army to he gave a free hand to Indian army, and he handled all the international pressure on account that Kashmir was an integral part of India, and he has the right to defend its territory and respond to enemy in the best way possible. There is more to story, I think, but we are, running out of time. So Gautamji, is it good time to take a break? Amitji? We'll continue on.
Yeah, I think we can take a logical break and continue from here in the next session.